Yes, you read that title correctly. Not too long ago, Venus, the planet Venus, was a comet. Not only was it a comet that humans saw in the sky, but it also had several close encounters with Earth. And in fact, its close encounters with Earth literally destroyed huge amounts of the population of this planet. To make matters more interesting, this took place in the 15th century BC. Now, if you're classically trained, everything I just said sounds insane. I promise it is not schizo. Everything I'm going to start to cover in this video, and it's going to take a lot of them, but we'll start here, is backed up not only by historical record, but also by science, scientific evidence. Even better, it's backed up by practical, testable, scientific evidence. You cannot ask for anything more than that, right? This is not like some dark matter or dark energy theoretical trash, like literally science. All right, so let's do this. What am I talking about? Why am I making the claim that Venus is a comet? And even more crazy, why am I saying that Venus was a comet in the 15th century BCE? Because that obviously means that our ancestors saw it. I mean, that wasn't all that long ago, relatively speaking. And to make matters even more funny, I'm using 15th century BCE in the mainstream chronological situation. This event probably technically happened even earlier. If you get rid of like the Dark Age situation in the early Middle Ages, how none of that existed, stratigraphy and all that stuff proves all that's garbage. On top of all of the forgeries from Tacitus, etc., and Bycialone, whatever the hell his name is. Anyways, that's another talk for a different time. I think I've talked about some of that. But anyway, as we cover this subject, I'm going to be sticking with just kind of mainstream chronology that everybody's generally familiar with. For those purists out there who already know that a lot of chronology is fake, messed up, etc., just roll with me, okay? I'm with you guys. I get it. I'm on your side. I agree 100% with you. But for our purposes here, we're going to stick with the normal thing. All right, so I'm making a claim Venus is a comet. Why? What the hell? How can I even make that claim? All right, well, let's get into what a comet is first. Because those of you who are classically trained or who don't care about what comets are, and I don't blame you. I mean, how many people really see a comet in their life? You might see one. Depends. And even if you see one, it's like, cool, wow, a comet. But it has like no effect on your life. I mean, today's day and age, if you see a comet, it's a spectacle in the sky. And the sky may as well just be a television screen because nothing happens. Like it's, the comet, great, it's far away. It doesn't matter. It goes by, great. Who cares? So people don't even think about this stuff anyways, especially historians. If you're an ancient historian, comets actually do play a large role, a huge role actually in ancient history, but they're always relegated to this kind of a backdrop that an event happens in, right? Like these every time you hear a comet being talked about, or an eclipse or any kind of a cosmological event, mainstream historians tend to place these things just in the background. An emperor died and there was a comet so and so. And the monkeys of Rome thought it was the gods talking to them. And then they thought it was an omen or whatever, right? Historians, they give zero credit, and everybody's a monkey to an ancient historian, mainstream ancient historian. Everybody's just dumb back then. So, the way things are written, it's like, oh yeah, there was a comet and it was a portent from a god. And the historians don't take it any further than that. They don't look into this stuff any further because they always consider our ancient ancestors to just be dumb, right? They believed in gods and they didn't know what they were talking about. And anyway, so that's a huge problem in history. And comets are just as much affected as all the other stuff dealing with gods, right? I mean, so today, historians can say, yes, well, we know a comet is a dirty snowball. It flies through space. And the monkeys back in Rome and in Mesopotamia didn't know what that was. So they thought it was a god, right? And that's how they interpret it because your average historian doesn't bother to learn any of the new sciences, and they don't bother to look at the people back then and take them seriously as humans. So astronomical events very easily get written off as the ancients back then thinking that, not understanding what was going on and creating all these fantastical stories to explain what they saw in the sky, which means that a lot of cultures' history are not taken seriously, because a lot of cultures' histories around this planet literally deals with cosmological events. And these cosmological events are written off by mainstream historians, because mainstream historians and scientists as well basically say, these people didn't know what they were talking about back then. They were stupid, so we know better and they don't know. We can't take anything that they wrote in their histories or any of their verbal or oral traditions and histories. All of it can't be used. All right, but there's a problem here, because pretty much every single ancient culture that exists has some sort of weird cosmological history that they talk about. And one of those cosmological events that these people talk about, and that's everybody. That's not just like one culture. It's everybody. They talk about comets. And the way comets are talked about, they're not talked about in a fashion of, oh, they're just some stuff we worship. These comets are talked about in a way that proves that they had an impact on the cultures themselves. And that don't mean just religiously. These comets literally cause physical problems. And these physical problems are extreme. They are problems such as drought, disease, mass death, etc. These comets are not just harbingers of these things, they cause these horrible events. And then mainstream historians, they just write these events off as natural Earth events that take place that they can readily explain, although go look for their explanations, they can't explain anything. It's always some theoretical volcano that erupted somewhere or whatever, or some earthquake that happened, natural earthquake that wasn't caused by a comet. This is what mainstream historians go off of. And this in turn allows them to hand wave basically everybody's historical recollections away. They can just get rid of them because they must have been crazy. So let's take the other route here. Let's go ahead and assume that when all of these cultures start talking about a comet or a celestial event of some kind, instead of us just saying, oh, these people are monkeys and they don't know what they were talking about, let's take it as fact. So if an ancient culture says they see a giant comet flying right by the planet Earth, and this comet, as it flies by, it puts Earth into total darkness for a week, let's take that as fact. Let's do that. So that's what Velikovsky did, right? So what Velikovsky did is he took all of that stuff. He took all of these ancient recountings, not just from Abrahamic religions, but from religions all over the planet. And they all lined up with the same stories. The only differences in their stories was relative to where they are on planet Earth. And this point of view is fascinating, because what it does is it shows us that, hey, if a religious culture is going to tell us the sun stood still in the sky for like a day, what does that mean? All right, let's just take it seriously. Okay, if the sun stood still from us on Earth, what would that mean is going on? Well, from a cosmological standpoint, from a physics standpoint, then we would have to say, well, I guess the Earth's rotation was stopped. That's what we could say. To make the sun stand still in the sky, from our perspective on planet Earth, the Earth's rotation stops. If you could stop the Earth's rotation, you could then have the sun look like it's standing still. And in theory, this is a possibility. There's nothing in physics that says this cannot happen. The only reason why people don't stop and think about it is because everybody is trapped into the theory of gravity from relativity's point of view. And that has absolutely destroyed the other part of science that is ignored nowadays, and that's the electric side, the electric magnetic side, right? The electric universe, the plasma physics. Once you start incorporating plasma physics and electric universe into your cosmological physics, everything changes. Electromagnetism is unbelievably amazing. I work with this stuff in my real life job, And this theory, the plasma physics, this has the potential to explain everything. And what it does in our case right here, talking about comets, it absolutely could explain how the planet Earth could have stopped its rotation. All right, so if you're with me that far, then how do you stop the planet's rotation? What do you do to stop Earth's rotation? You would need something to do it, right? So in our case, we would have another cosmological body that could do it. If Earth is charged with a certain kind of electrical charge and another large body is charged with another kind of electrical charge, you would have an interaction between the two bodies. Now, the outcome of this reaction between the two bodies could be several things. But one of the things that it could be is that you would have the potential to stop the Earth's rotation. But you would need another body large enough close by to do it. And that brings us to Venus. And yes, after 10 minutes of babbling, we finally get to the point of the video, which is Venus being a comet. Now, today's day and age, most people just look at comets as small, dusty snowballs. All right, we know that comets are no longer small, dusty snowballs. NASA's own evidence has now proven that comets are they're rock. I mean, they are rock and they're formed of minerals. They're not just some snow and some ice flying around. The dusty snowball theory was dumb anyways, right from the get-go. A dusty snowball would not last even one rotation around the sun. You would need more compacted material to last, several revolutions around the sun. And that's what we find. So all of these probes that NASA has sent out and other agencies have sent out, we don't find dusty snowballs. We find rocky bodies. Now, we'll go into comets and that level later. We're going to focus on Venus here. But the only reason why I bring this part up is to prove and show, hey, look, comets are not dusty snowballs. They're just rocky bodies, which means that technically any rocky body could be a comet. There is no size limit to a comet. There's probably another thing that your average person doesn't think about. When we think about comets, we think about little snowballs flying around, relatively little. We certainly do not think planet-sized balls being a comet. But there's absolutely nothing at all that says that can't be the case. So, at one point in time, the claim right now is that Venus was a comet. And in the 15th century, around there, we had two major run-ins with Venus while it was in comet form. And these two interactions that we have with Venus, and they're close. We don't bump into it or anything. There's no collisions. And I feel that's important to remember because too often, especially if somebody's quoting Velikovsky uses the term collision, but he's never saying that Earth and Venus hit each other. That's not what he's saying. What he's talking about is their magnetic field collisions interacting with one another, and then with basically he uses the term collision in the sense of an interaction, not a physical impact. I just want to get that out there and just clarify that really fast so that anybody who has ever heard of Velikovsky and quote and who has never actually read or studied his stuff, anytime he says collision in the sense of Venus, for example, he's just talking about an interaction. That's important because what I want to do for you guys right now really fast is let me read a little bit of Velikovsky to set the stage because he says it better than I'll be able to say it. And then we'll go through and we'll discuss some of the stuff that he talks about, and then we'll relate it to the new sciences that we have nowadays that prove that all of this stuff could technically happen. What I'm about to say right here is an excerpt from Worlds in Collision. This would be Part 1, Venus. All right, Part 1, Chapter 1. The most incredible story. The most incredible story of miracles is told about Joshua ben Nun, who, when pursuing the Canaanite kings at Beth Horon, implored the sun and the moon to stand still. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down a whole day. By the way, so Velikovsky covers all kinds of religions. I'm starting here for all of you, the atheists out there who hate this stuff. Do me a favor. Don't look at the Bible as this God worshiping thing. Do me a favor and keep the Bible as just a collection of historical stories that was one day eventually collated into what you know as the Bible. I feel if you look at the Bible like that, you'll get a lot more out of it. And no, I'm not religious, and no, I don't believe in God either. So you're in good company. And for those of you who are religious, don't worry. You're in good company too, because I'm not hating on you either. It's fascinating what is in people's religious books. I think this is important to relay. All right, let's keep going. This story is beyond the belief of even the most imaginative or most pious person. Waves of stormy sea may have drowned one host and then been merciful to another. The earth could crack asunder and swallow up human beings. The Jordan could be blocked by a slice of its own bank falling into the river. Jericho's walls, not by the blast of trumpets, but by an incidental earthquake, could have been breached. So basically what he's saying is that all of those events, those are all things that could definitely happen without any craziness. But that the sun and moon should halt in their movement across the firmament. This could only be the product of fancy, a poetic image, a metaphor. A hideous implausibility when imposed as a subject for belief, a matter for scorn. It manifests even a want of reverence for the Supreme Being. According to the knowledge of our age, not of the age of the book of Joshua or of Jasher is written, this could have happened if the earth had ceased for a time to roll along its prescribed path. Is such a disturbance conceivable? No record of the slightest confusion is registered in the present annals of the Earth. Earth consists of 365 days, 5 hours, and 49 minutes. A departure of the Earth from its regular rotation is, however, thinkable, but only in the very improbable event that our planet should meet another heavenly body of sufficient mass to disrupt the eternal path of our world. It is true that aerolites and meteorites reach our Earth continually, sometimes by the thousands and tens of thousands, but no dislocation of our precise turning around and around has ever been perceived. This does not mean that a larger body or larger bodies could not strike the terrestrial sphere. The large number of asteroids between the orbits of the planets Mars and Jupiter suggests that at some unknown time, another planet revolved there. Now, only these meteorites follow approximately the path which the destroyed planet circled the sun. Possibly a comet ran into it and shattered it. He's talking about the asteroid belt out there. That's a whole other discussion and an amazing one, and maybe something that is the remnants of what happened actually during one of the Venus-Earth cataclysms. That a comet may strike our planet is not very probable, but the idea is not absurd. The heavenly mechanism works with almost absolute precision, but unstable, their way lost, comets by the thousands, by the millions revolve in the sky, and their interference may disturb the harmony. Some of these comets belong to our system. Periodically they return, but not at very exact intervals, owing to the perturbations caused by gravitation towards the larger planets when they fly too close to them. Velikovsky continues, if the head of a comet should pass very close to our path, so as to affect a distortion of the career of the Earth, another phenomena besides the disturbed movement of the planet would probably occur. A rain of meteorites would strike the Earth and would increase to a torrent. Stones scorched by flying through the atmosphere would be hurled on home and head. So basically what he's saying is that not only there's multiple effects that happen if a large comet were to interact with the Earth. And one of the things that would happen is that we would absolutely be bombarded with tiny meteorites from the comet's tail, basically. He continues more. In the book of Joshua, 2 verses before the passage about the sun that was suspended on high for a number of hours without moving to the Occident, we find this passage. As they, the Canaanite kings, fled from before Israel and were in the going down to Beth Horon, the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah. Azekah, and they died. They were more which died by the hail of stones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. So what this is claiming is that literally meteorites killed more people than the actual battle. I always find this fascinating that there's cataclysms throughout Earth. Sorry, side note, really fast. There's all these crazy cataclysms that human experience. The Venus cataclysms being one of them. People are still fighting massive battles all over this planet. Here we see an example of a battle we find in the Bible, but there's all the other accounts as well all over the planet that deal with these catastrophes. We often find these people are in the middle of some sort of conflict. It's hilarious, man. It's crazy. This is one of the reasons why I'm actually inclined to believe this stuff actually happened. Because humans are still doing human things. People are still warring over territories. They have meteorites falling down upon them. They see Venus in the sky, and it's causing all of these problems for them. But they're still fighting territorial battles. They're still doing and having to deal with human things. Anyways, that just always blows me away that even in the face of ultimate catastrophe, humans are still waging war against each other like this on just a whole huge level too. It's amazing. All right, let's move on. Velikovsky goes on more with Bible stuff. I'm going to read it because it's interesting. So for you atheists, stick with me. We're not talking about religious texts. We're not talking about religion, by the way, here. We're literally just telling a story of a recounting of something that happened. So it's important to remember that as I read this, because the information here is important, because we want to use this information to match up with other quote-unquote religions and or mythologies and real histories that ancient cultures told. This is one of the things we need to cover. All right, so stick with me. Thank you. All right. The author of the book of Joshua was surely ignorant of any connection between the two phenomena. By that he means the phenomena of a comet having a trail behind it that would have carried meteorites. He could not have been expected to have had any knowledge about the nature of aerolites, about the forces of attraction between celestial bodies, and the like. As these phenomena were recorded to have occurred together, it is impossible that the records were invented. The meteorites fell on the earth in a torrent. They must have fallen in very great numbers, for they struck down more warriors than the swords of the adversaries. To have killed persons by the hundreds or thousands in the field, a cataract of stones must have fallen. Such a torrent of great stones would mean that a train of meteorites or a comet had struck our planet. So in this case, it would be the train of meteorites coming from the comet. The quotation in the Bible from the book of Jasher is laconic and may be given the impression that the phenomenon of the motionless sun and moon was local, seen only in Palestine between the valley of Ajalon and Gibeon. But the cosmic character of the prodigy is pictured in a thanksgiving prayer ascribed to Joshua. Sun and moon stood still in heaven, and thou didst stand in thy wrath against our oppressors. All the princes of the earth stood up. The kings of the nations had gathered themselves together. Thou didst destroy them in thy fury, and thou didst ruin them in thy rage. Nations rage for fear of thee. Kingdoms tottered because of thy wrath. Thou didst pour out thy fury upon them. Thou didst terrify them in thy wrath. The earth quaked and trembled from the noise of thy thunders. Thou didst pursue them in thy storm. Thou didst consume them in the whirlwind. Their carcasses were like rubbish. The wide radius over which the heavenly wrath swept is emphasized in the prayer, all the kingdoms tottered. So what he's saying is that they're acknowledging that it wasn't a local event. This wasn't just, the Bible people saw this and nobody else could have seen this. What they're saying is that everybody was affected by this. Didn't matter what religion or what creed you were, everybody got screwed over by this. A torrent of large stones coming from the sky, an earthquake, a whirlwind, a disturbance in the movement of the earth, these four phenomena belong together. It appears that a huge comet must have passed very near to our planet and disrupted its movement. A part of the stones dispersed in the neck and tail of the comet smote the surface of our Earth with a shattering blow. Are we entitled, on the basis of the book of Joshua, to assume that at some date in the middle of the second millennium before the present era, the Earth was interrupted in its regular rotation by a comet? Such a statement has so many implications that it should not be made thoughtlessly. To this I say that though the implications are great and many, the present research in its entirety is an interlinked sequence of documents and other evidence, all of which in common carry the weight of this and other statements in this book. The problem before us is one of mechanics. Points on the outer layers of the rotating globe, especially near the equator, move at a higher linear velocity than points on the inner layer. Consequently, if the Earth were suddenly stopped or slowed down in its rotation, the inner layers might come to rest, or their rotational velocity might be slowed, while the outer layers would still tend to go on rotating. This would cause friction between the various liquid or semi-liquid layers, creating heat. On the outermost periphery, the solid layers, the crust, would be torn apart, causing mountains and even continents to fall and rise. This is important. Basically, what he's bringing science. This is science. There's nothing to argue here. There's nothing weird about this. Cosmology, there's nothing that says a planet can't be stopped in its rotation by some other gravitational effect. There's nothing wrong with that. So for all of you doubting this, there's nothing to doubt. So it is possible. We just need an actor to make it happen. But what's even more interesting about what he just said here, especially for all of you Atlantis or other lost continent people, he's literally telling you that this is what it would take to either get rid of a continent or make a continent rise out of the water. So that's huge, because right there now we have a cause that could actually create a scientific reason for the loss of an entire continent. You do not need any weird garbage. You don't need to say anything like, oh, the Atlanteans, they had crazy special weapons and they killed themselves. Nope, you don't need any of that. All you need is a cosmological event that is 100% outside of anybody's control, and you're done. The planet is gone, or at least the planet is going to be torn up and shredded, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's completely scientifically possible. All right, that's important, but let's go on. As I shall show later, mountains fell and others rose from level ground. The earth, with its oceans and continents, became heated. The sea boiled in many places, and rock liquefied. Volcanoes ignited, and forests burned. Would not a sudden stop by the Earth, rotating a little over 1,000 miles an hour at its equator, mean a complete destruction of the world? Since the world survived, there must have been a mechanism to cushion the slowing down of terrestrial rotation, if it really occurred, or another escape for the energy of motion besides the transformation into heat, or both. Or if rotation persisted undisturbed, the terrestrial axis may have tilted in the presence of a strong magnetic field, so that the sun appeared to lose for hours its diurnal movement. These problems are kept in sight and are faced in the epilogue of this volume. So we'll cut it here. I know I've only focused on the Abrahamic side of things right now. The next video will cover the other side of the planet, and then we will corroborate the two experiences to build a picture of what happened as Venus passed by the Earth. So that's what we'll do. We'll split this up into multiple parts. So up until this point, what we've got is we have at least an entire history of some sort over there in the Middle Eastern longitudinal areas, talking about what they saw during this particular event. And we've talked about some of the sciences of some of the destruction that may happen. Now there's way more to discuss. This is just an introductory into what we're going to get into. The next talk will cover what happened on the opposite side of the planet so that we can begin to paint a better picture and really start to prove the point here that something pretty amazing happened cosmologically during the 1500s-ish BC. All right, don't forget to use your critical thinking skills and apply them all to this. Feel free to ask questions, and if anybody has any other stuff they want to add that maybe I don't know, please let me know. I'm still learning this stuff too. I'm going to lay a lot on you guys, but there's still so much more to discover. All right,